Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Diversity of Plants Zone. In this channel, you will get every information related to plants and their diversity throughout the world. Before starting this video, I request you all to please subscribe my YouTube channel. This channel needs your support in the form of your feedbacks, comments, subscription and likes. I'm trying my best to fully share the knowledge about the plants and their diversity in the form of videos. So I hope that you will like this video and appreciate my work. Today's topic of my video is about morphology of roots, and I have divided this video in 3 parts. Today I will discuss the part 1 of this video. I hope that you will enjoy this video. So let's start the video. Part 1. First of all, I will discuss about the definition of root. Definition of root. The root may be defined as the cylindrical plant organ which is devoid of chlorophyll, bearing no buds or leaves, tending to grow downwards away from the light, and it develops from the radical part of the embryo. Root, the plant organ, as shown in the figure. Next, I will discuss about the meaning of root. Generally, root is said to be the part of the plant which remains inside the soil, but there are subaerial as well as aerial roots also. Actually, the root is a positively geotrophic part of the plant, having a root cap and many unicellular root hairs. Ontogenetically, the root arises from the radicle. Next, I will discuss about the characteristics of roots. First, root is the descending or underground part of the plant axis. Second, root is usually positively geotrophic. It means it grows downward into the soil, and positively hydrotrophic. It means that it grows towards the source of water, but negatively phototrophic, which means it grows away from sunlight. Third, root is usually cylindrical and non-green. For example, it lacks chlorophylls, but sometimes green, as in tropa and tinophyllum. Fourth, root doesn't bear the nodes, internodes, leaves, or buds. Exceptions are sweet potato and wood apple, etc. Fifth, the growing point of the root tip is subterminal and protected by a root cap or calyptra. Sixth, unicellular root hairs present just behind the root caps, which increase the absorptive surface area of roots. Seventh, lateral roots are endogenous in origin. For example, it arises from the pericycle of the main root. Rootless plants. Many plants growing in aquatic habitats do not possess roots because there is a little requirement for the absorption of water and mineral salts. For example, Wolffia and Utricularia, Myriophyllum or myriophyllum, ceratophyllum. In other aquatic plants, roots develop only for balancing. For example, in the limna and pistia, and fixation, for example, the hydrilla. Next, I will discuss about the functions of root. So, roots perform two kinds of functions. First is primary and the second is secondary. So, the primary functions are performed by all kinds of roots and they are structurally adapted to perform these functions. Second, the secondary functions are specialized one and are performed only by those roots which are modified accordingly. First, I will discuss about the primary functions of roots. The primary functions of roots are: first is encourage or fixing the plant firmly to the soil so that they are not easily uprooted. Second is absorption and translocation of water and mineral from the soil to the aerial parts of the plant. Third, prevent the soil erosion by holding the soil particles. So the first primary function of the root is the encourage. So the roots take part in fixation of the plant and supporting the aerial shoot system. Second is the absorption of water. Roots absorb water from soil. Third, absorption of minerals. So the roots absorb mineral salts from soil. And the fourth is the prevention of the soil erosion. So the roots hold the soil particles firmly to prevent the soil erosion. Fifth is transport. They take part in transport of absorbed water and minerals to the shoot system. And similarly, root has channels for the flow of organic food from the aerial parts. So, these are functions of the roots. The main functions of the roots, like the transport, like the encourage, like absorption of water and minerals from the soil, and it also provides mechanical support to the plant as shown in the figure. Next, I am going to discuss about the secondary functions of roots. In many plants, the roots are modified to serve many secondary functions like the food storage, mechanical support, and the various physiological activities other than absorption. So the first secondary function is storage, and this storage, it occurs in fleshy roots. So the examples of the fleshy taproots are: first is conical, for example carrot. Second is the fusiform, for example radish. And the third is napiform, for example beet, turnip. And the fourth is the tuberous, for example the mirabilis. So depending upon their shape and grouping, adventitious fleshy roots are of 6 types. First is the tuberous, which is also known as root tubers, and the example of these are sweet potato. Second is the fasciculated roots. So for example asparagus and dahlia. Third is the palmate, for example orchis. So fourth is the nodulus, for example curcuma. So fifth is the moniliform, for example, Momotica. And sixth is the annulated, for example, Ipecac. So the secondary function of the root is extra or mechanical support. So it is provided by the several types of roots. First is the buttress roots, which are also known as the plank roots. For example, bombax. Second are the prop roots. For example, banyan and rhizophora. So the third is the stilt roots. For example, maize and sugarcane and pandanus. Third secondary function of root is the climbing. So the roots help some of the weak stemmed plants to cling and hence climb up a spot. For example, the ivy and tacoma, beetle and money plant. So the fourth secondary function of the root is perenniation. In many biennial and perennial plants, for example the trichosanthes. And the fifth is the nitrogen fixation. Nitrogen fixation is the fifth secondary function of root. Nodulated roots of pea, bean, gram and meti, etc. So the sixth secondary function of root is the aeration. So the prop roots, knee roots and pneumatophores of mangrove plants, for example rhizophora, heritiera and sonoraceae or sonoraceae. Seventh secondary function of root is reproduction. So by bearing adventitious buds on both the tap roots, for example in the Dalbergia, and adventitious roots, for example sweet potato. Eighth secondary function of root is the hygroscopic roots. So the roots absorb water from air, for example the epiphytic roots, young prop roots of the banyan. Ninth secondary function of root is floating. So by storing air, for example in Gessia, which is also known as Ludwigia, some of the roots functions as floats. So the 10th secondary function of root is balancing. Free floating plants usually possesses a cluster of adventitious roots from their nodes and bases to help in balancing the plants over the water surface. For example is Limna, Pistia, and the next is the Eichhornia. 11th secondary function of root is photosynthesis. So as in Trapa and Tinophyllum, Ctenospora and Podostemum. 12th secondary function of the root is haustoria or haustorial roots. They occur in the sum of parasitic plants for absorption of food from the host, for example in the cuscuta and mistletoe. 13th secondary function of root is the mycorrhiza. The roots of several plants are associated with the fungi to form the mycorrhiza. Mycorrhiza helps the plant in absorption of phosphorus and nitrogen from organic sources and protects the plants from attack of pathogenic fungi. So the 14th secondary function of root is the growth regulators. Roots synthesize the certain growth regulators For examples, cytokinins. Other functions of the roots. So generally, the roots are positively geotrophic and negatively phototrophic, which means they grow downward into the soil and they grow away from the light. And they're positively thermotrophic and exhibit the positive hydrotropism, for example, which means they bend in the direction of temperature. That is the most favorable for the growth and have a tendency to grow in the direction of the moisture supply. So next I will discuss about the types of roots. When a seed germinates, the embryonal root, which is also known as the radicle, gradually elongates to form the primary root. The primary root may give off branches. The secondary roots are formed, and these secondary roots, which in turn branches off to produce the tertiary and quaternary roots. So types of roots: primary, secondary and tertiary roots. In the first figure, you can see that when a seed germinates, the embryonal root, which is also known as radicle, is produced. And when this embryonal root grows and it forms primary root, it means that the radicle or embryonal root gradually becomes the main root of the plant, which is known as primary root. And this primary root again branches off to produce secondary root. In the next figure, you can see clearly the main root, the embryonal root or radical root of the plant becomes the primary root, and this primary root again branches off to produce the secondary root. In the third figure, you can also see clearly that the primary root or main root of the plant branches off to produce the secondary root, and this is the root here as shown in the figure. On the basis of their origin, roots are of two types. First is taproot and second is adventitious root. So first I will discuss about the taproot. In dicotyledonous plants, the primary root becomes the main root, and that root is termed as the taproot. On germination of seed, the radicle elongates into the primary root or true root or taproot. In dicot plants, the taproot is persistent and produces lateral roots, and these lateral roots such as the secondary roots, tertiary roots, etc. So all lateral roots arise in the acropetal succession, for example, which means the younger roots are towards the apex and older roots are towards the base. The taproot and its branches constitute the system which is known as the taproot system. Second type of root is known as adventitious root. So monocotyledonous plants generally lack the taproot. In these plants, the root formed from the radicle is short-lived, and from the base of stem, the young, strong and vigorous roots develop. These roots are known as adventitious roots. So which means the roots developing from parts of the plant other than the radicle. These are the roots that grow from any part of the plant other than the radicle. In monocot plants, the taproot is short-lived and soon replaced by the adventitious roots. A group of adventitious roots and their branches constitute a system which is known as adventitious root system. So the next type of the root is known as seminal roots. In some members of Poaceae, Poaceae includes grasses. Additional embryonal roots, which are known as seminal roots, arise from the base of the radicles. For example, you can see in rice, in barley, etc. So these roots come out just after the radicle during the germination. So types of the root, taproot. So in these both figures you can clearly see the taproot. So the main root of the plant, the true root of the plant, is known as primary root. Primary root branches off to produce secondary root, and secondary root in turn branches off to produce the tertiary root. In the second figure you can see that the main root of the plant, primary root, which is also known as the taproot, and this primary root branches off to produce secondary root, and secondary root in turn branches off to produce the tertiary root. Both these secondary root and tertiary root are known as lateral roots. So this is root here and this is root tip as shown in the figure. So adventitious roots, you can see in both these figures, this is the main plant and this is the main root of the plant. And these are adventitious buds, as you can see in the first figure. In the second figure you can clearly see the adventitious roots which are arising from the other parts of the plant other than the radicle. In this figure you can see the seminal roots, which is also a type of root. So this is the coleoptile and this is the mesocotyl, and you can see this is the radicle, the main root of the plant, and these are the seminal roots. So seminal roots are only present in Poaceae members or grasses. Okay, in the next figure you can see that these are the brace roots and these are crown roots, and these are seminal roots, and this is the primary root or main root of the plant, and these are in the other plant you can see with the lateral roots. So next I will discuss about the morphology and growth of the root. A typical root can be differentiated into 5 regions. So from apex to base, they are, first is the root cap, and root cap is also known as calyptra. A root, whether tap or adventitious, has the same different regions. So each root at its tip possesses a protective covering, and that protective covering is known as root cap. The root cap usually protects the actively dividing cells and it lubricates its passage through the soil and controls the direction of the root growth. The root cap is absent in aquatic plants. It is a cap-like protective structure of the growing root tip. So in pandanus, which is also known as the screw pine, multiple root caps are present, while in the aquatic plants, for example in Pistia and in the Eichhornia and Limna, root pockets are present instead of the root cap. So below the root cap, the zone of cell division is present. So the function of this is to protect the root meristem. Second function is to secrete the mucilage that help tend the root to penetrate the hard soil. Third function is helps in the perception of gravity. Darwin 1880. Fourth function is root pockets functions as balances. So second is the growing point or meristematic zone. So this zone consists of meristematic cells. Meristematic cells are known as actively dividing cells, and it is about 0.25 to 1.0 millimeter long and lies just behind the root cap and thus subterminal in position. Its shape is like an inverted concave dome of the cells. The central layer rarely dividing cells are called as the quiescent center, and this region gradually passes into the region of elongation. So the function of this zone is root meristem adds cells to the root cap and the basal region of the root. So the third region is known as the zone of elongation. The cells of this region are columnar and slightly thick-walled. It is about 1 to 10 millimeter long and lies just behind the meristematic zone. As the name implies, it is the site of the rapid and extensive cell elongation. This zone increases the length of the root. The external cells can absorb the water and minerals from the soil. So this region in turn merges into the root hair zone. So the next region of the root is root hair zone or zone of differentiation. It is about 1 to 6 centimeter long, and it is the zone where the cell differentiate to form the epibelema, cortex, endodermis, pericycle, xylem, and phloem. Many cells of the epibelema elongate to form unicellular root hairs. As the root grows, the new root hairs develop and the older one shrivel and sloughed off. This region in turn merges into the region of maturation. So the function of this region is root hairs increase the absorptive surface area of the root. Next region of the root is the zone of maturation. So the cells of this region has root hairs and which are the extensions of the epidermal cells. The cells of region of maturation start differentiating and permanent tissue of the root is produced. It constitutes the major portion of the root. The cells attain the maturity when they reach this zone, and this region gradually passes into the mature zone where the differentiation of the cells is complete and the tissues like the epidermis, cortex, and the stele can be recognized. The function of this region is first is the lateral roots may emerge from the pericycle, and the second function is radial differentiation of roots which causes the secondary growths in dicots. So morphology and growth. There are two figures. In the first figure you are seeing the germinating seed showing a young root. In the figure A, you can see the germinating seed which is showing a young root. In the first figure, you can see clearly that this is a seed and this is the zone of maturation. This is root hair zone and this is the zone of elongation. In the last you can see this is zone of cell division and this is root cap. In the second figure B, you can see the longitudinal section of young roots which is showing the different parts. In the first, you can see that this is a vessel and this is root hair. So both of these are included into the root hair zone. In the next, you can see that this is endodermis differentiates, and this is the first vessel differentiates, and this is the first safe tube matures. This is epidermis and this is cortex, and all these are included in the zone of elongation. And the next, you can see that this is apical meristem and this is the quiescent center, and both of these are included in the zone of cell division. And in the last, you can see that this is the mucosal sheath as shown in the figure. Morphology and growth. Again, there are two figures. These are the regions of the root. In the first figure, you can see that this is the root hair. After root hair, you can see the region of maturation. After this, you can see the region of elongation, and this is region of meristematic activity. In the last, you can see this is the root cap. In the second figure, you can see that there are three areas or three zones. First is the area of maturation, and area of maturation includes the vascular slender and root hair. Second is the area of elongation, and third is the area of cell division. This is the apical meristem and this is root cap as shown in the figure. Morphology and growth. Again, there are two figures. In the first figure, you can see this is the maturation region, and maturation region includes root hairs. In the second, you can see that this is elongation region, and third is the meristematic region, and this is root cap. In the second figure, you can see that there are three zones. First is the zone of maturation, second is the zone of elongation, and third is the zone of cell division. Apical and primary meristems are included in it. This is the stele, this is cortex, and this is epidermis, and these are root hairs. So there are three primary meristems. First is the protoderm, second is the ground meristem, and third is the procambium. This is apical meristem, this is the quiescent center, and this is root cap as shown in the figure. Morphology and growth. Again, there are two figures, and the root tip has four developmental zones. So again, you can see that there are three regions. First is the region of maturation. Region of maturation includes endodermis, and this is pericycle. And after that, there is a region of elongation. Region of elongation includes the xylem, this is phloem, and this is cortex. In the last, you can see that this is the apical meristem, and it includes the epidermis. In the last, you can see that this is root cap. And you can see clearly that this is endodermis, this is pericycle again, this is xylem in the center, outside the xylem it is the phloem, and this is cortex, and this is epidermis. In the second figure, you can see that there are three regions or three zones. Maturation zone, which includes the mature vessel elements. Mature vessel elements are included in maturation zone, and endodermal cells differentiate. And this is the first vessel element which is begun to differentiate. Next is elongation zone. Elongation zone includes the maximum rate of cell elongation, and the first safe tube element begins to differentiate. And this is the cell division cease in the most layers. In the last, you can see that this is the meristematic zone, and there is the maximum rate of cell division in this zone. And this is quiescent center. In the last, you can see that this is the root cap. This is pericycle. These are cortical cells. This is epidermis, and this is emerging lateral root. And this is the lateral root perimodium as shown in the figure. 4 developmental zones. So the roots grow and develop from their distal ends. Although the boundaries are not sharp, 4 developmental zones can be distinguished in a root tip: the root cap, the meristematic zone, the elongation zone, and the maturation zone. So these 4 developmental zones occupy only a little, which is more than a millimeter of the tip of the Arabidopsis root. The developing region is larger in other species, but the growth is still confined to the tip. With the exception of the root cap, the boundaries of these zones overlap considerably. So the first is the root cap, which protects the apical meristem from mechanical injury. As the root pushes its way through the soil, the root cap cells form by the specialized root cap stem cells. As the root cap stem cells produce cells, the older cells are progressively displaced towards the tip, where they are eventually sloughed off. As the root cap cells differentiate, they acquire the ability to perceive gravitational stimuli and secrete the mucopolysaccharides, slime, that help the root penetrate the soil. And the second is the meristematic zone, which lies just under the root cap. And in the Arabidopsis, it is about a quarter of a millimeter long. The root meristem generates only one original primary root, and it produces no lateral appendages. Third, the elongation zone. As its name implies, it is a site of rapid and extensive cell elongation. Although some cells may continue to divide while they elongate within this zone, the rate of division decreases progressively to 0 with increasing distance from the meristem. And fourth is the maturation zone. The maturation zone is the region in which the cells acquire their differentiated characteristics. Cells enter the maturation zone after division and elongation have ceased. Differentiation may begin much earlier, but the cells do not achieve the mature state until they reach this zone. The radial pattern of differentiated tissues becomes obvious in the maturation zone, and later in the chapter we will examine the differentiation and maturation of one of these cell types, the trachary element. As discussed earlier, the lateral or branch roots arise from the pericycle in the mature regions of the root. The cell divisions in the pericycle establish the secondary meristems that grow out through the cortex and epidermis, establishing a new growth axis. The primary and the secondary root meristems behave similarly in that divisions of the cells in the meristem give rise to the progenitors of all the cells of the root. So next I will discuss about the root system. Root system. We all know how important the roots are for the survival of the plant, though we may not be able to see them sometimes. However, they are always doing their job. So roots are not only the one of the important structures present in the plants, but they also perform various critical functions. They play a major role in the life processes. Interestingly, not all the plants have the roots. Some plants like the mosses and liverworts lack the root system. Root system. So this is the root system as shown in the figure. Next I will discuss about the types of the root system. All the roots have almost similar functions, but they vary in stature and the site of origin. So based on these criteria, the roots are mainly divided into three types. That is, first is the taproot system, second is the adventitious root system, and third is the fibrous root system. So types of the root system. Types of root systems: taproot system, fibrous root system, and adventitious root system as shown in the figure. Again, the types of the root system, the taproot system and fibrous root system are shown in the figure. First, I will discuss taproot system. First of all, I will discuss about the definition of taproot system. So it is a mass of roots which develops from the radicle of the embryo. It consists of a taproot, secondary root, and tertiary roots and rootlets. The radicle itself grows up directly into the main or primary root. The persisting primary root is known as the taproot. It is usually the most prominent, thickest, and largest of all. Taproot becomes gradually narrow towards the tip. Secondary and tertiary roots are respectively the branches of the first and second order. They are formed in acropetal succession. For example, the youngest towards the growing point and oldest towards the base of the parent root. In orientation, the taproot is vertical, secondary roots are horizontal or oblique, while the tertiary roots run in the different directions. Rootlets are the ultimate root branches. They bear root hairs for the absorption. In this system, the root developing from the radicle persists throughout the life of the plant. Such a root is termed as taproot or primary root. So this root branch off to produce the secondary, tertiary and quaternary branches. The primary root along with the subsequent branches constitute a system which is known as the taproot system. Taproots appear from the radicle of the embryo of a germinating seed. In the taproot system, there is one main root from which the lateral root branches originate. Upon germination, the first root that arises from the radicle is the main cylindrical root, which is known as the primary root, and which grows vertically downward. From the main root, the first order roots arise, which are known as the secondary roots, and then from these secondary roots, the second order roots arise, which are known as tertiary roots. On the tip of the tertiary roots, there are present the thin hair-like structures, which are known as the rootlets. The primary root is the most prominent, thickest and longest of all. Taproots gradually became narrow towards the tip, and taproots are present in dicotyledonous plants. Taproots can persist for a lifetime but are often replaced by the fibrous root system in the later stages of the plant development because the radicle of the most of the plant species dies after germination. Taproots tend to be deep-rooted and are difficult to uproot. So if during the process of uprooting a taproot plant, the root breaks off, the part that is left in the soil often sprouts again. Taproot grow in the acropetal succession, that is, the youngest is present at the growing end, while the oldest towards the base. So rootlets are very delicate structures and are the ultimate branches of the taproot system. They are responsible for the water absorption in plants. So primary roots always grow in the vertical orientation, while the secondary and tertiary roots grow into the horizontal orientation. Taproots are one of the three major types of roots in the root systems found in the plants. The other two are adventitious root system and fibrous root system. So the taproots arise from the radicle of a germinating embryo. The radicle of many plant species dies soon after their maturation and hence the taproot gets converted into the fibrous root system in the later stages. Morphologically, a taproot system consists of one of the thick cylindrical main root which is known as the primary root. Branches of the roots arise from the primary roots and these branches are known as secondary and tertiary roots. At the tip of the tertiary root, a thin hair-like structure is present which is known as rootlet. These rootlets are critical for water absorption from the soil, so the taproot system is observed in dicots. Taproots are generally deep-rooted and difficult to uproot. Taproots grow in acropetal succession, that is, the younger roots are present at the growing end of the taproot, while the older roots are present near the base of the stem. The examples of the taproot system can be seen in a variety of plants, even the ones present in the kitchen gardens like the carrot, radish, turnip, and dandelion, parsley, beetroot, sugar beet, and rose plant. Taproot system. This is the taproot system as shown in the figure. Again, this is the taproot system which includes the primary taproot, and this primary taproot branches off to produce the secondary taproot. Secondary taproot again branches off to produce the tertiary root, and these are rootlets as shown in the figure. Taproot system. The parts of the taproot system. First you can see that this is the trunk. This is soil level. And below the soil level, the roots are started. First is the primary root, which branches off to produce the secondary root. Secondary root branches off to produce the tertiary root. In the second figure, you can see clearly taproot, the primary root of the plant, branches off to produce the secondary and tertiary roots. And secondary and tertiary roots are included in the category of lateral roots. This is root tip and this is root hair. Next I am going to discuss about the types of the taproot system. The taproot system is of two types. First is the racemose taproot system and second is the cymous taproot system. First I will discuss about the racemose taproot system. The primary root continues to grow and penetrates the soil to considerable depth and is very prominent. The secondary and tertiary roots are smaller as compared to the primary root. The oldest secondary branches lie close to the soil surface, while the younger secondary branches are present near the tip portion of the primary root. This type of root system is found in deep feeding dicots, for example in the oak. Such plants are known as deep feeders. So the deep feeder taproot system has an elongated taproot system which penetrates the deep layers of the soil. It is mostly met in trees. So the deep feeder taproot system is also called the racemose taproot system. So this is the racemose taproot system, typical or racemose taproot system. This is primary or this is taproot, which branches off to produce secondary root, and secondary root give rise to the tertiary root, and these are rootlets as shown in the figure. So next is the cymose taproot system. The primary root persists throughout the life of the plant but doesn't go deep into the soil and stops its growth after some times. The secondary roots developing from primary root are quite strong, but they also invade the upper layers of the soil like the primary root. This type of root system is found in surface feeding plants. The plants having this type of root system are called as surface feeders. In surface feeders, the taproot doesn't elongate very much. The secondary roots spread to a greater extent, mostly horizontal near the soil surface. Such a system, also named as cymose taproot system. The cymose or surface feeder taproot system of some annual plants consists of thin fibrous roots, and it may be called the fibrous taproot system. So this is the cymose taproot system. Surface feeders or cymose taproot system as shown in the figure. Next I am going to discuss about the modifications of taproot. The taproot becomes swollen and fleshy with the stored food. The secondary roots remain thin. Hypocotyl, embryonic region between the cotyledons and radicle, may also join the taproot in storing food. So stem is reduced and discoid in the beginning and bears the radical leaves. In many plants, the taproots may get swollen due to the storage of reserve food material in them, and the stem proper in these modifications is very much reduced. A part of the hypocotyl may also be involved in storage of food. So due to storage of the food, the taproots assume the various shapes which determine a particular type of root. So roots are critical for absorbing the water, minerals and salts from the soil. In some cases, the structures of the roots get modified to supply the nutrients and water to different parts and carry out the additional functions. These roots get modified to maintain the physiological and mechanical integrity of the plants. The taproots are modified into the following. First is the storage of food. Second is the carry out nitrogen fixation or nodulated tuberculate roots. Third is the respiration, pneumatophores, aerophores or respiratory roots. So first is the storage of food. Taproots which are capable to store food are known as storage roots. These roots are modified in such a way that they can store food prepared by the plants inside them. Later on, this food is utilized by the plant for the nutritional purpose during the unfavorable environmental conditions. Therefore, it is also called as reserve food, so humans usually get benefited from these storage roots. These roots are included in our everyday meal, for example carrot, sweet potato, radish, etc. In storage roots, the cells of the primary taproot or the main root swell and start accumulating the food particles. Due to the accumulation of food, such roots appear fleshy or swollen. However, the secondary or tertiary roots remain thin. In some plants, the hypocotyl, the embryonic region between the cotyledon and radicle, is responsible for storing the food. So storage roots are categorized into 4 types based on their structure. First is conical, second is fusiform, and third is napiform, and fourth is tuberous. So depending upon the shape, the fleshy taproots are of the following types. So first is the conical taproot. Here, the fleshy taproot resembles a cone, and that is the thickest towards the base and gradually tapering towards the apex. Many thread-like structures or secondary roots are found throughout the length of the conical fleshy root. For example, the carrot, Daucus carota. This root is bored at the base and gradually taper towards the apex, for example, in carrot and radish. In this type of storage taproot, the primary root starts swelling from the base of the stem and gradually reduces towards the apex of the root. This type of root has one swollen end while the other end is tapered. This fleshy taproot resembles the cone, and many thread-like secondary and tertiary roots arise throughout the length of the conical fleshy taproot. So the example is carrot, Daucus carota. Modifications of the taproot. This is the conical taproot as shown in the figure. Second is the fusiform taproot. The fusiform fleshy root is like a spindle that is the thickest roughly in the middle and narrow towards both its base and apex. For example, in the radish, Raphanus sativus. Vernacular name or common name is Moli. The fusiform root of the Indian radish consists of swollen hypocotyl near the base only and swollen taproot in the remaining region. The latter possesses the thin and thread-like secondary roots. In European radish, the taproot forms only the terminal, tapering fleshy part of the root. The middle and the basal fleshy parts are formed by the hypocotyl. The taproot assumes the shape of a spindle, for example, swollen in the middle and tapering towards the end. And for example, English radish. So in English radish, the upper and the middle portions are hypocotyl and the lower part is the root proper. In this type of storage taproot, the primary root is tapered at both the ends being the base of the stem and the apex of the root. It appears like a spindle, thickest from the middle and narrow from the ends. In conical taproots, the tapering occurs at only one end, while the fusiform tapering is present at both the ends. Examples. So the first example is the Indian radish. Indian radish, its fusiform roots consist of swollen hypocotyl near the base and swollen taproot in the rest of the region. And the second example is the European radish. So in European radish, the taproot only forms the terminal tapering fleshy part of the root, while the hypocotyl forms the middle fleshy parts. Modifications of the taproot. This is the Indian radish as shown in the figure. And the second example is the European radish as shown in the figure. So the third is the napiform taproot. The fleshy root is very thick at the base and is almost spherical. It suddenly thins out towards the apex and top-like. For example, in the turnip and brassicarapa. Vernacular name or common name is the shalgam or shalgam. And beet, which is also known as the Beta vulgaris. Vernacular name is the chucundar, and in turnip, most of the swollen part is hypocotyl. The taproot occurs only towards the narrow pointed apical region, which also bears the thread-like secondary roots. In beet, both the taproot and hypocotyl are swollen. The root is very much swollen above and abruptly tapers towards its lower end, as in the turnip and beet. In turnip, the swollen portion is mostly hypocotyl, while the narrow portion is the root proper. In beet, swollen portion is contributed both by the hypocotyl and the root. This fleshy root is very thick at the base of the stem and appears like a sphere, The swelling of the taproot occurs from the base of the stem but doesn't reduce gradually. The taproot tapers at the base of the root. So the examples are the turnip, Brassica rapa. Most of the swollen part of the turnip is hypocotyl. The taproot appears at the tapered end of the turnip, while the secondary and tertiary roots are also present. Second example is beetroot, which is also known as the beta vulgaris. Both the hypocotyl and taproot form the swollen structure. So, modifications of the taproot, this is the turnip, which is also known as Brassica rapa, as shown in the figure. And this is the beetroot, beta vulgaris, as shown in the figure. So, the fourth type is the tuberous taproot. They are those thickened taproots which do not assume any definite form. For example, the Mirabilis julafa, 4 o'clock plant. And the next is the Trichosanthes, vernacular name is the parvo or parvo. And the next is the Echinocystis lobata. In Echinocystis lobata, the tuberous root is lobed and weighs as much as 22 kg. These are the storage taproots which do not attain any particular shape. A tuberous root is an enlarged fleshy root modified to store food. So the examples are the Mirabilis julafa, 4 o'clock plant. Second example is the Trichosanthes. Vernacular name is parvo. Next is Echinocystis lobata. And the fourth example is cassava. This is tuberous taproot as shown in the figure. So, these are fleshy taproots. In the figure A, you can see that this is the conical fleshy taproot of carrot and gajar. And this is the fleshy taproot. This is radical leaves. This is reduced stem. And these are secondary roots. In the B figure, you can see the fusiform root of Indian radish or mooli. These are radical leaves. This is reduced stem. This is fleshy taproot. This is fleshy hypocotyl. And these are secondary roots. In the figure C, you can see the fusiform root of European radish. So in the C figure, you can see the fusiform root of European radish. So this is the radical leaves, this is reduced stem, this is fleshy hypocotyl, and this is secondary root, and this is fleshy taproot. In the fourth or D, you can see the napiform fleshy root of turnip or shalgam or shalgam. So this is the fleshy hypocotyl, and this is the taproot, and these are the secondary roots. This is radical leaves and reduced stem as shown in the figure. So this is the tuberous root of Mirabilis as shown in the figure. So next I am going to discuss about the difference between the fusiform and napiform taproots. Difference. First I will discuss the difference of the fusiform root, and then I will discuss the napiform root. Fusiform root. It is spindle shaped in outline. Napiform root. Napiform root is nearly globular or spherical in outline. Fusiform root. Apical region of the root shows the gradual tapering. Napiform root, the root suddenly tapers towards the apex. Fusiform root. Half or less than half of the fleshy root is formed of hypocotyl. Napiform root. In turnip, most of the fleshy part is made up of hypocotyl. In beet, more than half of the fleshy part is formed of hypocotyl. Fusiform root. Taproot forms a part of the fleshy root. Napiform root. Taproot forms the apical non-fleshy part of the root in turnip and part of the fleshy root in beet. Fusiform root. Fine thread-like secondary roots do not occur in the basal swollen part but are found on the remaining half. Napiform root, fine thread-like secondary roots are found in the narrow apical part and nearby area. So next I am going to discuss about the special types of the taproot. So first is the nodulated and tuberculate roots. They occur in the papilionaceous or leguminous plants like the pea and Pisum stivum or Pisum stivum. Gram, for example, as Cicer aritinum. Groundnut, peanut, which is also known as the Arachis hypogea, and mati, which is also known as the Medicago falcata. Soybean, which is also known as glycine max and alfalfa, etc. The secondary, tertiary roots and sometimes the primary root develop the numerous small or large irregular swellings which are called root nodules or tubercles. The root nodules include the million of minute nitrogen fixing bacteria of the genus Rhizobium. For example, the R. leguminosarum. These bacteria pick up the free nitrogen present in the soil atmosphere and convert it into organic compounds of nitrogen. The property of converting the free nitrogen into nitrogenous compound is called nitrogen fixation. So, some of the nitrogenous compounds are taken up by the legume in return for the food and shelter. Therefore, both the bacteria and the leguminous plants are benefited by their association. Such a mutually beneficial relationship is called reciprocal symbiosis or mutualism. So nodulated roots are the type of taproots that are irregularly swollen. In this, the primary, secondary and tertiary roots are swollen and are called as the root nodules or tubercles. These root nodules consist of millions of nitrogen-fixing bacteria of genus Rhizobium. The nitrogen that is present in the atmosphere cannot be utilized by the plants directly. So the Rhizobium present in the root nodules help to convert this nitrogen into the form which can be easily utilized. They pick up the free nitrogen from the atmosphere and convert it into organic compounds of nitrogen, a process known as nitrogen fixation. The leguminous plants take up the some amount of nitrogen from their roots. This nitrogen is fixed by the bacteria in exchange for the food and shelter. Such type of relationship in which both the organisms are benefited is known as mutualism. Examples, they mostly occur in the leguminous plants such as pea, Pisum stivum or Pisum stivum, gram, Cicer aritinum, groundnut, pea, Arachis hypogea, meti, Medicago falcata, soybean, glycine max, and lawn leguminous plants containing the root nodules are Parasiponia and actinorhizal. Actinorhizal plants such as the alder and biberry. So the special type of the taproots, nodulated root of a legume. So this is the primary root, this is secondary root, and these are root nodules which are also known as tubercles as shown in the figure. This is nodulated tuberculate root as shown in the figure. Again, this is the nodulated tuberculate root as shown in the figure. So next special type of the taproot is the pneumatophores, aerophores or respiratory roots. They are breathing or respiratory roots which are found in plants growing in the mangroves or saline swamps near the seashore. For example is Avicennia Sonorisha, Heritiera, vernacular name is Sundri, and these plants possesses the spreading horizontal cable tubes or roots. The horizontal roots develop upright aerial roots or pneumatophores at short intervals. So the short, downwardly growing absorbing roots are formed from the bases of pneumatophores. Pneumatophores or respiratory roots come out of water and pick up oxygen for the perspiration of the roots. So excess carbon dioxide is also given out. For this they bear the small pores which are called lenticels. Lenticels are also known as the pneumatophores. So near their tips, the remaining surface of the pneumatophores is covered by a cork. Pneumatophores are the aerial taproots which come out of the soil and help the plant to breathe. Therefore, they are known as respiratory roots. They are also found in those plants which are growing in the mangrove or swamps. The soil of the mangrove is clayey and sticky, which doesn't allow the air to pass through it. Therefore, the roots of such plants come out of the soil for respiration, and pneumatophores grow vertically upward. Therefore, they show the negative geotropism. The surface of the root contains the small pore-like structures which are known as lenticels or pneumatophores, which help in the exchange of gases. The remaining surface of the root is covered by a cork. So the example of the pneumatophores include the Avicennia germinans, which is also known as the black mangrove, and Sonorisha. Third example is the Heritiera. Vernacular name or common name is Sundri. And the next example is the bald cypresses. Special types of the taproots, pneumatophores, which are also known as aerophores or respiratory roots, as shown in the figure. So special types of taproots, pneumatophores or respiratory roots. In the first figure you can see that this is a mangrove tree with the pneumatophores coming out of a mud. This is the mangrove tree and these are pneumatophores as shown in the figure. In the second figure you can see that these are pneumatophores with the lenticels. This is pneumatophore plant in the B figure, and this is horizontal root. These are absorbing roots, and these are lenticels, which are also known as the pneumatophores as shown in the figure. If you like my video, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and press the bell icon as well for further notifications. Thanks for watching. Thank you so much for your time and appreciation.